So top-down sequential invocation, which is what we've been doing with this thing called print and this thing called input. I didn't write the code to do it. I'm just using code that other people wrote. The next one is selection. Selection allows me to choose the type or to choose whether or not to execute logic, because up till now every single line of code executes. Well, what happens if I don't want every single line of code to execute? What happens if I want to choose whether or not something executes based upon some given condition? And if the condition is true, then I will execute a group of logic, one or more lines of code. This is called a selection structure. It allows me to select whether or not to execute code. There are several different ways that we can accomplish that. We are going to focus our attention on a selection structure called if. All right, so if. This is what it looks like. I'm going to use the word if, lowercase if, and then I'm going to have a condition. The fact that it's in the less than, greater than symbols means that something goes there. I need to replace it. And it's not going to go in less than or greater than symbols. Then I'm going to use a full colon. And anything that I put after that will be a part of the group or the grouping, or I could call it the container. If is a container. If is a container. So I'm going to tab in, and I'm going to do stuff. The way that Python knows what's inside of the container is what's tabbed in. If it's tabbed in, it's going to think that it's part of the if statement. If it's flushed to the left, no longer part of the statement. In HTML, we learned about containers. We use containers with opening and closing tags. Anything I put inside the opening and closing body tag was displayed on my screen. And so we had a body container. This has an if container. So here's an example. If age is equal to 2, colon, tab in, and then do something like print you're in the terrific 2s. If current time is greater than class start time, colon, then I'm going to tab in, print you are late for class. So this is an example of my if selection structure. This is one of the structures that we're going to be using. Let's come back to our program and let's implement that. So I copied and pasted that into a notepad. I'm going to save my note, and just in case something terrible goes wrong, I'm going to save this. All right, there we go. So now if something terrible goes wrong, I will still have that available to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask somebody for their age, and then we're going to make comments about whether or not they're able to drive, because driving is a lot of fun. So I'm going to ask somebody for their age. So what I would do is I would say let age equal, and then I would use the input command, and I would say something like enter your age. But I do need to surround that by quotes. Enter your age, and if I run it, it should say, give me a number. I'm going to put in like 25. What data type does that come in as? String. That's the problem that we've already encountered, right? And the idea is that age, I'm going to compare it to certain driving ages, like 15 or 873, something like that. So I can't have it as a string. I need it to be a number. How am I going to make it a number? How am I going to force it to be a number? This is an excellent idea, because the problem I had in my cool and amazing temperature conversion 2.0 was the fact that every time I encountered far, I had to force it to a float. Every time I encountered it, during the conversions and during the display, I had to force it to a float, right? So how about if from the very beginning, I force it to a float, so that every time after that, it actually is a float? If you don't mind, I'm going to come back here, and we've decided that the way, I'm going to push that over there a little bit, we've decided the way that I could force something to be a float, or excuse me, I'm going to force it to an int, is just to put the data type that I would like to force it to, and the parentheses. And whatever I wanted to force to be an int, in this place I'm going to force it to be an int, goes inside of these parentheses, right? Well, I'm going to delete this closing parenthesis, because what I would really like inside of the parentheses is that statement right there. I would like it to ask them for their age, capture that value, and then force it to an int, and finally set it to age. So now age should actually be, well, let's see what age is. I'm going to print type age. Let's see what type age actually is. I'm going to run it. We'll put an age 25. What do you expect the answer to be? Yeah, it's an int. Now, every time I use age, it is an int. I no longer have to force it every time I use it. So I'm going to force it to an int at the moment that I read it in. And then I'm going to say something like, well, let's use our if statement. If age is, let's say, greater than 15, and then I need that colon, I'm going to press the enter key, and I want you to notice what Python does or what Code Sculptor does when I press enter. If you'll notice, it tabbed in my cursor. Notice the positioning of my cursor. Every time prior to this, it flushed my cursor to the left. Now it tabs it in because Code Sculptor knows that I am inside or trying to create an if container. So if age is greater than 15, I'm going to print something like, yay. How do you spell yay? You can drive. I'm going to put an exclamation point on there because driving is freedom. If age is greater than 15, yay, you can drive. There you go. All right. So I'm going to run it and see what happens. Enter your age. We're going to find out if that I wanted to thoroughly test this program. If I wanted to make sure that my program is running, I have 3 values that I should key in. 3 separate, distinct values. I'll call them test cases that I should key in. Can anybody tell me one of the 3? Which means that one of the things that I should test is if the condition is not true. 0 would make my condition false. Therefore, in theory, my if statement should not run. So let's test 0. And I'm going to test 0 as one of my test statements because it makes my condition false. So if I key in 0, the expectation is nothing will happen. And there you go. Well, it did type int because that's above my if statement. So what is another one of the things that I should probably test? 15. 15 is what is called a boundary value. It's called a boundary value because what is going to happen if I key in 15? Well, that depends upon how I built it. What do you expect to have happen if I key in 15? Nothing. Why? There's 15 on the screen. I see it. Yeah, because 15 is not greater than 15, which means nothing should happen. And now again, I need one more test case. There's something greater than 15. I don't know, 25. So now the condition is finally true. I tested something that made the condition false, something that made it true, and what I call the boundary value. That's dead on 15. What happens if I key in 15? What if I wanted to include 15 in this? Yeah. I would have to have greater than or equal to. If I wanted to include the boundary value, I'd have to say greater than or equal to. Now, when I keyed in 15, it would pick up that boundary value. So if you say, how do I know if I want to include the boundary value in my program or not? Ask the client. The client will tell you, hey, should 15-year-olds be included in there? If you're not sure, ask the client. For the purposes of this class, I am the client. And if you don't know whether or not a boundary value should be included, ask me. In the industry, if you didn't know, you would ask the client. The client could be your boss, your manager, your coworker. It could be the person that walked through your door and is paying you money to write this cool and amazing program. If you're not sure, ask the client. For these purposes, I am the client. All right, so there we go. Let's write another one. If statements. So if I press the enter key, every time I press now, it still thinks I'm inside of the if bucket. So what I'm going to do is I am going to flush to the left. That's the only way that I can get out of the bucket. And I'm going to put another one. I'm going to say if age is equal. So now I want to see if age is exactly equal to 15. So if you don't mind, I remove the greater than equal from the first if statement because I want to do something if they're exactly equal to 15. But I can't just say age equal to 15 with the full colon. Why can't I say age equal to 15? What is the equal sign? It's an assignment operator, right, which if I do this, it will literally assign 15 to the variable age, regardless of what my input captured. And so I wanted to do a logical comparison, not a assignment, which means that I use 2 equal signs. And so the way that I remember to use 2 equal signs is phonetically I say if age is equal, 15 is equal. When I hear that phonetic is equal, that 2 syllables is equal, makes me think of 2 equal signs. So I'm going to come to the end when I press enter. Python knows that I'm trying to create an if bucket. If age is equal to 15, this time I'm going to print something like driving is such freedom. I'm going to say, oh, you can get your learner's permit. You can get your, and then I'll do another print statement. If I press enter, it's still inside of the if container because I am tabbed in. I'm going to print something else. Run, get it now. Because who in the world wouldn't want to have a learner's permit learning to drive? I understand there's people in New York born, live, and die never driving. That's incredible to me. In Manhattan. All right, so let's run it now. Now I have two if statements. They are standalone, independent if statements. So it says enter your age. Once again, the second print statement. How am I going to test the second one? Because we've already tested the first one. If I put in 100, I would expect the first one to execute, but will the second one execute? What do I have to key in if I want the second one to execute? Yeah, not a trick question. It really wasn't. So if I say, not 14, but if I say 15, there it goes. It skipped the first one because, well, 15 is not greater than 15. And then it executed the second one. They are independent, standalone if statements. I should probably have one more because I was listening, and I'm going to, if notice every time I press enter, it's going to tab it in. And so if I want to break out of this if bucket, I'm going to have to flush back to the left. We'll do one more. And I'm going to say something like, because I was listening to on the radio this morning, there's a woman who has turned 117 years of age about 2 days ago. And then he spent about 2.5, 3 minutes telling us all the things about, like, she was born the year they invented aspirin. So she is as old as aspirin. She was born the year that they invented paper clips. And then he went on with information like that for the next 2.5 minutes. It was fascinating to find out about all the things. She was born in 1899. She's still alive. They said, we had the friends over, family surrounding her. She had a cake. She blew out her candles. They gave her a kiss on the cheek, told her happy birthday, and then she did what every 117-year-old should do. She took a nap. So
She's lived in 3 centuries.
it is that's excellent. Lived in 3 centuries. That's an excellent point to make. So we should probably make some kind of limitation because I can't remember quite what her name is. Oh, they asked her how did she live to be 117 years old. She attributed it to 3 things. 3 things that our culture would tell us never, ever do. Never do. The first one is she was single. Her whole life she was single. The second, she drank a lot of whiskey. And the third is she never ate vegetables her whole life. Never ate veggies. So I guess if you want to live a long and healthy life, never eat vegetables, drink a lot of whiskey, and remain single. There you go. All right, so I'm going to say something like if age, how old should we allow people to drive? If age is greater than, if you owned a rental car company, how old would you, at what age would you say, okay, you're just too old to drive? 117 is probably too old. Sorry. If all you're going to do is eat cake, blow out your candles, and then nap, I probably don't want you having my Ferrari. So what age do you think? 90. All right, I'm going to put 90. If age is greater than 90, I need that full call. Oops, not 910, but 90. I'm going to say something like you should probably not be driving. Because it seems like, yeah, 90 is pretty old. So I'm going to run it. One more time, I'm going to run it. I'd like to test that last print statement. What test case am I going to have to key in? What value do I have to key in to test that last value? 100. We'll do 100. Oh, let's do 117 in celebration of, I wish I could remember her name, her birthday a couple days ago. 117. What do you expect to have happen when I press enter? 2 of them are going to run. The first one is, because I'm pretty sure 117 is greater than 15, which means the first one is going to run. And then the third one is going to run. That's because they're standalone if statements. It evaluates the condition on each of the 3 as it sequentially moves down through my list. Yes, sir.
Her name is Emma Morano.
That's it, Emma. Her name is Emma Morano. Emma Morano. Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, now it's unhappy. And the reason why I was unhappy was because I had some spaces above it. And it knows how many spaces that I have above it. If I have 5, it's happy. If I have less than 5, 4, 3, it's unhappy, and then as soon as I have none, all of a sudden it becomes happy. We're going to do it one more time. I'm going to ask them what their letter grade is. What is your letter grade? Enter your class grade. I'm going to put it in a variable called grade. I'm going to set it equal to, but I would really like this to be a floating point. It'll come in as a string, so I'm just going to force it to a float to begin with. The way that I force it to a float is whatever I put inside of those parentheses will be, if possible, will become a float. What I'd like to be inside of there is an input, and the input will say something like, enter your class grade. And because I'm a good developer with good user interface skills, I'm going to tell the user what I'm looking for. And so I'm going to say something like 1 to 100, just so that the user has an idea of what I'm looking for. 1 to 100, within that range. Don't make the user guess. What is my class grade? Freshman. That is a class grade. Maybe that's a class standing. And then I'm going to say, if grade is less than 74, print, you'll have to take the class again. You'll have to take the class again. In the CS department, if you are a CS major, you have to get a C or better to pass. 70% is a C minus, is not a passing grade for CS majors in CS courses. You say to yourself, I'm not a CS major. If you ever become a CS major between now and the time you graduate and you have CS classes with a less than 74, you'll have to take them again or they won't let you graduate. They won't count towards your graduation. Just thought you might want to know that. So I'm going to do that if statement. Let me run it and see what happens. So I have that age up there. I'm going to put in something for age. Enter your class grade. If I put in 70, because C's get degrees, and it's going to say you'll have to take the class again. 70 is actually a C minus. 70 is not a passing grade for CS1030 if you're a CS major now or any time in the future. So let me run it again. So if you have 85, then that if statement doesn't run. So let's do another if statement. How about if we say if grade is greater than 95.1. Oops, that's less than. Oops. And it flushed straight to the left. If you don't mind, I'm going to push this down because I'm running out of room, well, on the screen. It flushed it to the left because I didn't put that colon there. But as soon as I put the colon there, Python goes, oh, you want a container. So if grade is less than 95.1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them if they missed any assignments. Because you might think the only thing I can put inside of an if container is a print statement, because that's all we've done so far. I can put anything inside of an if container, anything inside of there, such as another prompt. I'm going to create a variable called miss any, and I'm going to set it equal to input. I'm going to say, did you miss any assignments? And because I'm a good developer, I'm going to say something like yes, no. I'm going to give them an example of the input. I could give an example of yes, no. Example of the input. And we're missing something. I know that because when I pressed the enter, my cursor did something bizarre. I'm missing something. The very fact that my two closing cursors are red means that I am missing something. And what I'm probably missing is the closing quote, because those two final cursors should actually only have one. Now I have too many of them. There we go. Now it's happy. All right, so let's try it one more time. Now when I pressed enter, it went to where I expected it to be. And then I'm just going to display what they said to me. So I'm just going to print out miss any, and then I'm going to have whatever they keyed in. I'm not going to force them to key in yes or no. I'm going to suggest that they key in yes or no, but I'm not going to force them to do it. So if their grade is less than 95.1, something else should happen. So now I say, enter your class grade. Now if they put in 85, it should prop another box that says, did you miss any assignments, yes or no? Doesn't matter what I type in. I could type in Pooh Bear because I'm not forcing a valid input. I'm just making a suggestion, yes or no, and then it will just mirror back to the user whatever it is that they keyed in. So we did this because I wanted to show you that I can have other things inside of an if statement besides just print. Let me ask you this question. If I can put other stuff inside of an if container, do you think I could put an if statement inside of an if container? It's called nesting. Yeah, absolutely. I could nest an if statement inside of an if container. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do is, I'm going to have one more down here, one more standalone if statement. I'm going to say if miss any is equal to, and then I'm going to compare it to a string literal. And so I'm going to say, because I prompted them for yes in lowercase, I'm going to compare it for if miss any is equal to yes and simultaneously age is less than 18. This is called a compound condition. So I can not only have just one condition like age less than 3, age greater than 15, I can have a compound condition. And I'm going to use my logic operators and, or. It's possible that it might not want it capitalized because Python, to a point, is a case-sensitive language. We're going to give it a try. So I'm going to go to the end, and I'm going to say if miss any is equal to yes and their age is less than 18, I'm going to say something like, does your mama know? Because this is obviously a minor who is missing an assignment or missing assignments. And then I will also print, don't tell your little brother. And that first question, does your mama know, is just going to be rhetorical. So I'm not going to capture an answer for it. So let me test it and see. These are standalone if statements. I'm going to test it and see what happens. I'd like to get to the last one. The only way that I'll ever get to the last one is if miss any is yes and their age is less than 18. Yeah, it doesn't like the capital N. There you go. It's going to have to be lowercase because Python is a case-sensitive language. Notice that it changed from black to purple because purple is a reserved word. There we go. Let's run it one more time. Enter your age. Well, my age is going to have to be less than 18, so I'm going to put 15 in here. And then it says my class grade. Well, the only way that I'll ever get to miss any is if my class grade is less than 95.1. I'm going to put in 63. Now it's going to say, did you miss any assignments? If I type in lowercase y, e, s, in theory, that last one should run. And it says, does your mama know? Don't tell your little brother. If I run it one more time, enter age 15. Class grade. This time I'm going to put in a class grade of 98. My program blew up. Can somebody imagine why my program blew up? Because it doesn't know what miss any is. Miss any is declared created inside of that if statement. If I never execute it, it doesn't exist. And the very next line of code tries to compare it to something. It has no idea what it is. So it says miss any is not defined. That's what my error message says. I don't know what miss any is. It was never created. So the best way to get around this is to declare the variable. And I am not a huge fan of just declaring variables on the run, on the fly, which is exactly what we're doing, but I guess we'll do that in Python. I have a tendency to want to declare variables all together in one place. So I'm going to create miss any up here, and I'm going to set it equal to something. I could set it equal to no. Now it exists. If I create it to begin with, now it exists. Now if I put in 15 and my grade is 98, it exists, so I can compare it to something, but since the statement is false, it doesn't blow my program. So it will evaluate the compound condition on my if statement, but miss any exists. And so it doesn't blow my program. It doesn't execute the if statement because the condition is not true.